Hello everyone, it's McCready Musings here. So you might have seen that I've been experimenting with shorts lately. I made quick, minute-ish long reviews for all the commanders in Edge of Eternities. Here's a compilation of all those reviews so you can watch them all in one big stream. Enjoy. This is a quick study of Sami, Wildcat Captain. Let's go. Okay, Sami may be 6 mana, but they're absolutely worth the cost. Being a 4/4 with double strike and vigilance is pretty great, but granting every spell in your deck affinity for artifacts is what really makes this Wildcat cook. Be sure to run lots of low mana but high power artifacts so you can get the biggest discounts possible going. The new Weapons Manufacturing card from Edge of Eternities is a great fit for this deck, since it grants you an additional artifact whenever you play one, as well as any other cards that spit out multiple artifacts once cast, like Tinker's Tote. Try to run cards with as few mana pips as possible, or even completely colourless cards to take advantage of affinity as best you can. Even huge cards like Myr Battlesphere, Blightsteel Colossus, and yes, the Eldrazi, if you're into that, can be cast for essentially free once you've got enough artifacts in play. Win, either by powering out these overwhelmingly strong cards using the affinity granted to them by Sami, or go a different route and take advantage of Sami's fantastic keywords by kitting them out with an armory's worth of awesome equipment and forcing through commander damage. Finally, be sure to run lots of protection effects to keep yourself safe from Vandal Blasts. As a commander, I'd give Sami a B+. They're costly to get out, but once they're in play, you can start snowballing quickly, and your opponents will need to be able to answer you before you use your affinity to outvalue and outmaneuver them. This is a quick study of Sami, Ship's Engineer. This version of Sami is definitely not as exciting as their Wildcat counterpart, but maybe you'll find something to love about this engineering edition of Edge of Eternities protagonist. Sami rewards you for having multiple tapped creatures in play by generating additional tapped 2/2 robot tokens, so you're going to want to go wide here and take advantage of that effect as much as possible. Whether you tap your creatures down by attacking with them or by taking advantage of other effects, or something even more unusual, is up to you. While Red and White are renowned for their less than stellar card draw, make sure that you pop Welcoming Vampire, Mentor of the Meek and Enduring Innocence into the deck to keep your creatures coming. Since you'll be charging out lots of creatures, make sure that you put cards in your deck that can turn building a wide board into a win con. Impact Tremors can gradually burn the opposition down, as can Throne of the God Pharaoh, and, if you're confident you can get a really wide board, maybe by using some token doubling effects, see if you can close out a game using the alternative win con of Halo Fountain. I would give this version of Sami a C-. It's not a hugely novel card, the payoff that it provides isn't spectacular, and it's the sort of card that I'd probably want in the 99 rather than in the command zone. All the same, if you've really enjoyed the story of Edge of Eternities and you want a deck that's a bit more chill than the affinity-based madness provided by Wildcat Captain, then I'm sure you can absolutely build something that's great fun around this interdimensional engineer. This is a quick study of Alpharael, Dreaming Acolyte. This printing of Alpharael is currently one of the least hyped Edge of Eternities cards, and it's not difficult to see why. It's hard to get excited about temporary Deft Touch and an ETB draw ability, but doesn't actually grant you any card advantage unless you discard an artifact. But if you squint, and I mean really squint, you can kind of build something that's a bit like a Shurikai Reanimator build around Alpharael. So the key here is to keep blinking Alpharael, using cards like Conjurer's Closet and Vassal Deep Dwelling. You can also get Alpharael quickly into and out of play by targeting it with Feigned Death effects and then sacrificing it, but that's a bit less practical. By continuously having Alpharael enter and exit the battlefield, you'll be able to both dig through your deck and fill up your graveyard. Be sure to run Sir Conrad the Grim so you can ping your opponents down while this is happening. Once your graveyard's nice and full of big scary beasties, you can reanimate them and use them to beat down the rest of the table. Is this strategy good? Well, not really. There are plenty of reanimation commanders who are a lot more powerful and don't need you to fill up your deck with flicker effects, leaving Alpharael Dreaming Acolyte with a D. This is a quick study of Alpharael, whose name I'm pronouncing correctly this time, Stonechosen. Now this is more like it. This version of everyone's favourite monoist has the incredibly powerful ability to cause an opponent to lose half of their life. This ability is absurdly easy to activate. You just need to ensure that a non-land permanent left the battlefield, or that you use the new warp mechanic during your turn. For all the power that Alpharael provides, he doesn't put many restrictions on you. You can run a sacrifice deck, or a deck that's just filled with efficient removal effects, or, if you're feeling a bit more thematic, you can just run lots of warp and void abilities from Edge of Eternities. If you're looking to maximise on power, having a Bloodletter of Aclazots on the battlefield will cause Alpharael's effect to just make whoever you target lose the game. You can also use Wound Reflection to pull this off marginally less expediently, but for a fraction of the cash. I'm giving this card an A. It provides a lot of strength, and there are plenty of different ways to build it. But also, since you'll need to wait a turn before you start swinging, it gives the rest of the table time to answer you, meaning it won't prove too problematic. This is a quick study of Haliya, Ascendant Cadet. Okay, just like Alpharael Dreaming Acolyte, this version of Haliya is a limited signpost uncommon, and isn't really designed to be a commander in their own right.
Nevertheless, you're still more than welcome to brew around her. Just don't expect a massive payoff for your efforts. As a 5-mana free, Haliya's not getting off to a great start. I guess technically she has 4/4 worth of stats, since when she enters she grants a +1/+1 counter to one of your creatures. By the time she attacks, you'll have gotten a second counter, but still, it's 2025, and this is far below the curve of what we'd expect from a commander. Haliya does grant some card draw, if creatures you control with +1/+1 counters on them get through, but don't get too excited though. Because her ability draws you a card whenever one or more creatures with counters on them get through, you'll only be drawing one card per player that you hit, rather than one card per creature. I'm going to give Haliya Ascendant Cadet a D+. She's more viable than Alpharael Dreaming Acolyte, but she's still not setting the world on fire. Selesnya +1/+1 counters is an incredibly bloated theme that already has a huge glut of commanders. Unfortunately, Haliya is neither unique or powerful enough to make a splash in the heaving sea of other, stronger counter-based commanders. Unless you were a massive fan of her role in the story, I'd go for Hamza Guardian of Arishin, Sovereign Okaneka Hao, or Burke Long-Ear of Valor instead. This is a quick study of Haliya, guided by light. Once again, Haliya finds herself in an incredibly overstuffed theme. This time it's mono-white life gain though, rather than +1/+1 counters. Fortunately, this version of Haliya does a lot more to set herself apart than her 2-colour counterpart. In most situations, she's better than the Gaffer, who, according to EDHREC, currently leads more than 600 decks. So if one of those decks is yours, you can tag him out for her, unless you're really into hobbits. Haliya can draw you cards during your end step if you've gained 3 or more life during your turn. That's majorly useful as a way of getting around mono-white's paucity of card draw options. She then throws in Soul Warden's ability to gain you life whenever you play a creature. In fact, a better version of that ability, since Haliya also grants you some life when you play artifacts. It's pretty easy to build around a life gain commander, especially a mono-colour one. Just fill your deck with other life gain cards and payoffs, and you're on your way. This can be done at all sorts of power and budget levels, whether you're going off with Heliod/Walking Ballista combos, or you're simply pumping up a Ajani's Primate, whatever you feel most comfortable with. I'm going to give Haliya Guided by Light a B. She's a good commander for a common theme. She's not breaking any new ground, but she's a clean execution of a simple and fun concept. This is a quick study of Tannuk, Memorial Ensign. Of the, at the time of recording, 24 legendary creatures in the game with landfall, Tannuk Memorial Ensign is the only one who deals direct damage to the opposition whenever you play a land. This matters a lot. While it may not sound too exciting, putting a tunneling Geopede in your command zone opens up all sorts of game-ending combos. If you can find a way to get infinite, or at least, 40 landfall triggers off, you'll win the game. One such combo involves using Quarian Ranger, a Shire Soul of the Wild, and then any third card. I'll link an explanation in the description. You can also use Scapeshift to pretty devastating effect. Of course, you can go for a far more fair build of Tannuk as well, swapping out these combo pieces for other landfall and ramp cards. Personally, this doesn't interest me a huge amount. There are plenty of other landfall commanders out there with more interesting payoffs than the 1 damage which Tannuk provides, but if it interests you, go for it. I'm going to give Tannuk a C for combo. There will be games which this Kavu crewmate closes out quickly, and it might be a bit frustrating to be on the receiving end of that. There will also be games where Tannuk just quietly and fairly dishes out burn damage and builds up a board full of Balefs. If you're playing against him, you won't know what you're going to get until the game gets going. This is a quick study of Tannuk Steadfast second. Alright, credit where it's due, Edge of Eternity is giving us some really great mono-colour commanders. This version of Tannuk grants all of your other creatures haste and lets you warp them into play for a single turn for 3 red mana. That means you should load your deck up with as many awesome high-cost creatures and artifacts as possible, especially if they have massive enter-the-battlefield effects or attack triggers. Remember that they'll be getting haste. Ancient Copper Dragon has an 85% chance of generating enough treasure tokens when it attacks that you'll be able to hardcast it on your next turn anyway. Portal to Phyrexia has the potential to remove up to 9 creatures in a 4-player game, and Balefire Dragon will probably be able to board wipe at least one of your opponents. Honestly, the biggest issue with this commander is that if you really want to pop off with it, you're going to have to sink a lot of money into buying all the massive bombs that you want to populate the deck with. I'll give Tannuk 2 an A. Admittedly, I am a bit of a Timmy, so I'm certainly the target audience for this card. But I find the thought of slamming out armloads of huge cards very enticing, and I'm sure there are many of you who completely get where I'm coming from there. This is a quick study of Syr Vondam the Lucent. Of all the uncommon commanders I've talked about so far, Syr Vondam the Lucent is definitely the most exciting. That's really not saying a lot, but it is something. He's got lifelink and Deft Touch, and grants the latter, along with a small offensive bonus to your other creatures when he enters play or attacks. Deft Touch typically works better as a defensive ability, since it does a great job of warding off attacks, but it's more than possible to use it offensively as well. Fill your deck with lots of creatures with first and double strike. That way they'll kill your opponent's creatures and not get taken out themselves. Try to give Syr Vondam first strike as well, to ensure he's not killed when he swings in. Menace is also great, since it lets your creatures act as 2-for-1s. Also, include creatures with abilities that can really cause discomfort if they get through, like Unstoppable Slasher, Drana Liberator of Malakia, or Reno and Rude. That way your opponents will be forced to make a tough call between giving up one of their creatures to block the Death Toucher or having its ability go off. Overall, you just want to go wide with this commander. The more creatures you have in play, the more the attack buff granted by Syr Vondam matters. An army of smaller creatures gets more of a benefit from having Death Touch than a small collection of big creatures that would have already had the strength to win combat anyway. Syr Vondam Lucent gets a C. The hardest thing about this deck is ensuring that Syr Vondam stays alive, but if you can crack that, you'll be pretty hard to stop. Well, at least until the board wipes start coming. This is a quick study of Syr Vondam Sunstar Exemplar. Syr Vondam's rare variant is a powerful aristocrats commander, but I'm going to have to knock it a few marks for originality. This is the third variant of this that we've seen on a very similar template. First came Bartolome del Presidio in Lost Caverns of Ixalan. For the same cost as Syr Vondam, this Ixalani Conquistador is missing Vondam's suite of useful keywords and his removal ability, but in return he gets a cost-free sacrifice ability, which I would say overall makes Bartolome more powerful. Then came Judge Magister Gabronth in the Final Fantasy set, who's basically just a strictly worse version of Vondam, lacking vigilance and the ability to care about artifacts and creatures going into exile, and his removal effect. Now we get Syr Vondam's Sunstar Exemplar. He's fine, he'll work as an Order of Aristocrats commander, maybe he's even the most interesting out of these three, but I mean, do we really need another variant of this? Especially so soon? All three of these cards are in Standard at the same time. If it wasn't for Gabronth and Bartolome del Presidio, I'd give Syr Vondam's Sunstar Exemplar a B, maybe even a B+. As it stands though, I'm going to have to knock that grade down to a D, since it's clear that Vondam, or at least the people that designed him, are reiterating pre-existing cards. This is a quick study of Memenon, Uthros Exile. Here's another uncommon commander that I like quite a bit. Memenon is a 1/3 flyer that puts a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control whenever an artifact enters play under your control. It's very easy to generate artifacts very quickly in Magic today. Cards like Academy Manufacture, Zorn, and Stormkiln Artist. You can use a Panharmonicon to speed up the rate at which you generate counters, not to mention the new Starfield Vocalist that provides the same effect attached to a 3/4 body. Also, make sure that you run plenty of artifact lands, so that even your land drops can enable Memenon. Memenon makes a great target for all the counters you'll be generating, since they're evasive and they deal commander damage to get opponents down. Just be sure that you run your fair share of protection effects like Deflecting Swat and Slip Out the Back to keep them safe. This is an artifact deck primarily, rather than a +1/+1 counter deck. You'll want the really great counter cards like the Ozolith or All Will Be One, but don't bother running any instants or sorceries that incidentally grant counters, like Combat Tutorial or Stealth Mission. I'm going to give Memenon Uthros Exile a B+. It's a simple card, but one that undeniably gets the gears in your head turning. This is a quick study of Memenon the Right Hand. This card reminds me a lot of the Reality Chip from Kamigawa and Neon Dynasty. They're both legendary mono-blue jellyfish that allow you to play the top card of your library. Memenon costs a lot more mana and only helps you cast artifacts, but in return it doesn't need to be equipped in order to let you cast stuff. It has flying and much more relevant stats, and turns all your artifacts into mana dorks that let you cast spells from anywhere other than your hand. Probably from the top of your library. So, you're going to want lots of artifacts, big and small. The small ones will help you ramp with Memenon in play, and you're also going to want lots of scrying and draw effects, to help you ensure that the top card of your library is an artifact that you'll be able to cast. There are several new cards from Edge of Eternity that are worth highlighting here. Appropriately enough, Memenon's Spaceship works pretty well, since it turns all of your artifacts in play into card draw, although you will need to charge it up a bit first. Uthros Titanic God Core works well as a Tolarian College once it's all charged up. An Insight Engine offers some repeatable draw based on the number of charge counters it has on it. If you end up running all of these cards, you'll probably want to include several additional charge counter synergies, or cards will proliferate to help you get going. I'm going to give Memenon a B. It feels a similar niche to the Reality Chip, but not so similar that it feels like a copy, and if you can get this one online, it'll be truly monstrous. This is a quick study of Xu-lfit Osteoharmonist. This is a scarily efficient reanimator card. I mean, it takes a turn to get going, unless you can give it haste, which is difficult but not impossible in mono black. But once it does, it can bring cards back from a graveyard repeatedly, turn after turn. It is true that the reanimation ability strips them of their abilities, but you can grant them a new suite of abilities by running cards like Death Baron and Gisa the Hellraiser, thanks to them returning to play as skeletons. You can also return cards with huge stats but negative abilities like Phyrexian Dreadnought and Death Shadow to play, turning Xu-lfit's ability negation into an upside. Since you'll have so many creatures running around with massive stats but no effect, include some cards to make them unblockable, whether that's a Rogue's Passage, a Whisper Silk Cloak, or a Prowler's Helm. If you really want the abilities on your creatures back though, you can blink them out of play using a Conjurer's Closet, and then when they return, they'll have their text boxes right back there. Make sure you include cards like Thousand Year Elixir and Mage Right Stone, which will help you untap Xu-lfit and return an additional creature every turn. I'm going to give Xu-lfit a B-. Mono Black has plenty of reanimation commanders, but this one contributes something new by being incredibly cost effective while also having a notable downside. This is a quick study of Dyadrine, Synthesis Amalgam. Dyadrine is certainly different to a lot of other +1/+1 counter-based commanders. It trades counters away in order to generate robot tokens and draw cards. Since you're making creature tokens, this is both a counter and a token-based deck. Some include cards that capitalise on both of these aspects. Effects like Hardened Scales, Branching Evolution, and Ozolith for Shattered Spire increase the rate at which you can pump out counters, and effects like Divine Visitation, Anointed Procession, and Parallel Lives will multiply the number of tokens that you'll be making. If you run Good Fortune Unicorn and Renata Called to the Hunt, then every creature that comes into play under your control will get a +1/+1 counter, meaning that the tokens Dyadrine creates will be primed and ready to have their counters taken away to generate even more tokens. Another thing to note about this commander is that it comes into play with a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to the amount of mana spent to cast it, rather than equal to the value of X, so you'll be getting 2 more counters than you might expect. I'm going to give Dyadrine a C-. Maybe I'm not seeing the full potential here, but this just doesn't really get me very excited. While yes, it is worth it to get rid of 2 counters to draw a card and make a creature, if I'm playing a +1/+1 counter deck, I want to see those counters bloom out of control and go wild. I don't want to rein myself in to inch out little scoops of card advantage and board presence. This is a quick study of Ragost, Deft Gastronaut. Despite playing no role in the Edge of Eternities story, this lobster Epicurean is currently the most popular commander from Edge of Eternities by far. I can see the reason for all the hype though. Ragost turns all of your artifacts into food, and can be tapped down to sacrifice a food to deal 3 damage to each opponent. Then, if you gain any life during a turn, Ragost untaps, enabling you to tap him down again to hurt everyone once more. It goes without saying that you want to get plenty of cheap artifacts together in this deck. I'll give another shout out to Tinker's Tote for giving you 3 artifacts all at once, and for also helping you gain the life you need to untap Ragost. Treasure Nabber is also fantastic, since it steals your opponent's artifacts, letting you feed them their own soul rings and arcane signets. Also, be sure to get a copy of the Battle of Bywater. This is a Lord of the Rings era board wipe that destroys every creature with power 3 or greater, and gives you a food token for every creature it takes out, sparing your commander while it hits almost every other notable creature on the field, giving you plenty of treats for Ragost to sacrifice. Also, be sure to include some recurring ways of gaining life on other players' turns to help Ragost untap, like Authority of the Consoles and Soul Warden. Granting Ragost lifelink is particularly great, since it will guarantee that they untap themselves every turn that they use their ability. I normally don't talk about flavour here, but since Ragost is a chef, it only seems appropriate. Just look at that art. Ragost is cooking up a bunch of gears, circuit boards and other tech, and just feeding them to the opposition. No wonder it does damage as they try to swallow it down. In case it's not clear, Ragost is an easy A. Despite their poor culinary skills, you can really cook up a great deck with them. This is a quick study of the Seriema. Legendary spaceships and vehicles can be your commanders now, and the Seriema seems pretty fun. Legends Matter is a very common green-white theme, from Captain Sisse 25 years ago back in Invasion to Sarah Farron, who was released this June. The Seriema is a mono-white Legends Matter commander. It tutors for a legendary creature the moment it enters play, an ability that I'm tempted to loop and repeat thanks to the Seriema being in white, which is access to the best selection of flicker effects out there. After that ability has been repeated a few times, or if you opt out of doing this altogether, then it's worth charging the Seriema up, since it makes all of your tapped mono-white legendary creatures indestructible, and it becomes a 5/5 flyer. Apart from Exile-based removal effects, they'll be safe from just about anything. There's a wide selection of great mono-white legendary creatures out there to grow up the Seriema, from Adeline, Resplendent Kefar, to God Eternal Aketra, to Gandalf the White, if you feel like voyaging over to Middle-earth. This deck also lends itself easily to sub-themes, so you can include a bunch of legends that care about life gain, or about artifacts, or about auras, and you should be able to accommodate that without a problem. I'm going to give the Seriema a B+. I'm narrowly keeping it out of A, because I can imagine it making everything invincible won't always be the most fun or interactive thing in the world for your opponents, but it's easy enough to destroy the ship, and then get the game back going again. This is a quick study of Dawnsire, Sunstar Dreadnought. I love the overkill on the damage that the Dawnsire can deal with its +10 charge ability. It's not quite as ridiculous as the toughness reduction on the card Overkill, or the power increase on Jumbo Cactar, but 100 damage should still be enough to wipe out just about anything. A Dawnsire deck needs to find as many ways as possible of taking advantage of this massive blast of damage. Being colourless unfortunately locks us out of a lot of options, which frankly may be for the best. I don't want to see a world where Dawnsire can be in the command zone and has access to red. The immediate synergy which jumps to mind is Stuffy Doll. You blast your stuffy doll for 100 damage, and it'll redirect that blast and kill one of your opponents. You can also grant Dawnsire lifelink using a card like Basilisk Collar, which is, frankly, hilarious, and enables a new route for victory using Etherflux Reservoir. You'll also need to run a wide variety of low-cost but high-power creatures in order to get the damaging abilities of a Dawnsire online as quickly as possible. I'm going to give a Dawnsire a C. I mentioned earlier this card would be terrifying if it had access to red, and the best solution for that is to slot it into the 99 of a deck with access to more colours, rather than running it as a commander in its own right. Of course, if you'd like to do that, more power to you, and I'm sure you can brew up something exciting, even under these colourless constraints. This is a quick study of Infinite, Guideline Station. So we leap from having no colours with a Dawnsire to having 5 colours. As 5 colour commanders go, Infinite Guideline Station is very much just a good stuff commander, and I feel it will make a very good first 5 colour deck for anyone looking to test out playing with all of the colour pie at the same time. When the station enters play, you make a 2/2 robot for every multicolour permanent that you control, and once it's charged up and it attacks, you draw a card for every multicolour permanent you control. There are 2 builds that I can see potential for here, both of which are slightly contradictory. The first of these is the aforementioned 5 colour good stuff deck. Just fill your deck with powerful multicoloured cards, charge the station up, and then use the ludicrous amounts of card draw that you get to bury your opponents in value. The second is to keep blinking or cloning the station, or really finding any way of repeating its enter the battlefield effect. So swarm the board with robot tokens to finish off the opposition, assisted by cards that pump up the strength of artifacts to turn those robots from 2/2s into formidable threats. I'm going to give this commander a B, a good introduction to 5 colour gameplay with the potential to try out some wacky robot swarming on the side. This is a quick study of Kilo, Apogee Mind. We're now moving on to the 4 pre-con commanders. Kilo has a lot to offer. Any Jeskai deck that cares about counters will love this little robot, since he can repeatedly proliferate to build the number of counters they have up and up and up and up. Whether that's buffing all of their creatures with +1/+1 counters, going super friends and increasing the number of loyalty counters on all their planeswalkers, or, if you're feeling particularly devious, corrupting the opposition using poison counters. If there's one thing that Kilo was tailor-made for though, it's stationing spaceships. Stationing a spaceship or crewing a vehicle means that Kilo can get tapped down without needing to charge into combat and put itself at risk. It grants charge counters to all the spaceships you control instead of just the one it's stationing thanks to Proliferate. While there aren't a huge number of spaceships out there right now, and honestly, I don't know how many we'll be seeing in the future, but Kilo's great at powering them up, alongside other cards that use charge counters. I'm going to give Kilo a B+. You can slot this card into the 99 or in the command zone of most counter decks, and it'll serve as a useful role player. This is a quick study of Inspirit, flagship vessel. Well, charge counters have finally got their own commander. For all the Lux Cannon, Everflowing Chalice and Titanforge stands out there, rejoice. Your time is now. Inspirit's first ability barely requires any charging at all. You'll almost certainly be able to get it online the turn the flagship enters play. With that done, you can start popping down counters every time you go to combat. Where possible, you're going to want to use charge counters rather than basic +1/+1 counters. On cards that care about them, it's a lot more impactful to get 2 charge counters. Any effect that lets you take extra combat steps are great, since you'll be able to get an additional 2 charge counters every time you move into that phase. Of course, taking an extra turn is a lot better than taking extra combat phases, so slotting Magistrate Scepter into your deck will pay off in droves. Although playing this card will paint a target on your back that can be seen from space.
This card also grants massive amounts of protection to all of your artifacts when it reaches 8 charge counters. Ironically though, it makes itself more vulnerable by crossing this threshold,
transforming itself into a creature and becoming targetable by a massive selection of additional removal effects. I'm going to give Inspirit a B-. It's great that charge counters have a designated commander now, but I'm more than a bit worried that Inspirit has the capacity to do some frankly unfun and game-centralizing stuff when in the wrong hands. This is a quick study of Sazarel, Genesis Shepherd. The theme of Sazarel's precon is sacrificing lands for value. While Halfhull, the other commander in the deck, is very overt about this, Sazarel is a bit more versatile and enables a handful of alternative strategies that can slot alongside or even completely replace the land sacking strategy of the precon. So, Sazarel lets you play lands from your graveyard, which is great if you sacrificed a bunch of them, but also incentivizes you to mill yourself by letting you replay the lands you've put into your graveyard. Sazarel lets you buff another creature whenever you sacrifice any non-token permanent. Sure, that could be a land, or you could go for more standard creature or artifact sacking builds. If I was running Sazarel, I'd want to pump up their power as much as possible in order to take advantage of their sacrifice ability. I'd run several small self-sacking artifacts and creatures alongside some creatures with powerful keywords that make great targets for the counters Sazarel produces. I'm going to give Sazarel an A. There are, again, many different opportunities to explore here, but don't be boxed in by the land sacrificing theme of the precon, and see what sort of decks you can devise around this scuttling shepherd. This is a quick study of Halfhull, the World Seed. I mean, I could just say, get this card up to 8 charges, play Scapeshift and call it a day, but I'll dive in a bit more deeply. Far more overtly than Sazerael, Half-Hull wants you to sacrifice your lands. This spooky spaceship lets you get rid of them to draw cards, and then play an additional land to make up for the one you just got rid of. Get your Gitrogs, your Titanias, and your Springbloom Druids, and get ready to reward yourself for intentionally destroying your own resources. It sounds absurd. Maybe it even is a bit absurd, but the payoffs do honestly make it worth tearing apart your own back row. I mean, just look at the new Baloth Prime card. There are also plenty of ways of undoing the damage that you've done to your own lands, from Aftermath Analyst to Splendid Reclamation. Since lots of these land recursion cards let you slam out a colossal number of lands simultaneously, you'll also want to include some landfall payoffs to reward you for when you rewild your board. Half-Hull gets a B. It provides plenty of power for kneecapping yourself with. It's the Gitrog monster, reimagined for 2025. I think it's a bit less elegant than our OG Frog boss monster friend. Feels like the need to charge it up does conflict with the rest of your game plan. If you can get it going though, you'll have something really interesting cooking.
So there we have it. All 22 commanders from Edge of Eternities reviewed. That was quite an undertaking. I won't be doing this for Spider-Man or Avatar, partly because those sets are universes beyond and based on IPs I'm not hugely passionate about, and partially because they have so many legendary creatures. I could be persuaded to do some individual reviews for specific commanders that you guys request though. Let me know in the comments if you'd like me to analyse Atraxa, contemplate Corvold, or have a look at Alpharael. Thanks very much.